Since the beginning of time and the development of mankind's ability for abstract thinking, we needed a way to define the natural phenomena that occurred around us. Which brings us to the question, the big question. How do we try to define the unknown around us, and what ways will we do this? The answer is obvious. We chose art. And from this rose various forms of it. We did marble sculptures, we made paintings, we did oral stories, and created songs. But instilled in each of these pieces of art is a fragment of the artist and the society. For example, take Michael Jackson's Black or White song. This song talks about the racial tensions of his time. It don't matter if you're black or white. What about the Renaissance artist? We asked a professor.
For Renaissance artists who were interested in math and proportions and philosophy, they saw the classical time period as just this perfect, ideal place where these thinkers were coming out and coming up with these innovative ideas, and so what the Renaissance artists did, where they used that as kind of a foundation, but they really built on it, and they were able to really understand their art through this lens, and see a lot of similarities between themselves and what classical artists were doing.
The Olympian pantheon was perceived as a potent source of disorder and suspect sensuality to be enjoyed, allegorized, and moralized against. Quote taken from an artist, but begs the question, why? Well, you also have to consider that the Renaissance was a monotheistic society, which they defined moral value within this framework to be composed of reasoning that manages to overcome what they considered to be basic human passions. So when this judgment on morality is paired with what you would consider Zeus's conquest described in the tales of classics, this coalesces into a god controlled by his passions. In Titian's painting Danae, the subject draws the viewer in with her unobstructed body, causing the viewer to follow her gaze and imagine themselves in her position, subjected to the golden reign of desire by the god. In the Rape of Europa, he uses the same characteristic to cause the viewer to look at the bull, whose face surprisingly looks non-threatening, but it also causes the viewer to imagine themselves as the bull, to have a feeling of sensuality that Zeus would experience. In Jupiter and Io, Antonio de Correggio also makes Zeus's form just as prominent and central as Io, but he chooses the part that is the most visual and engrossing, because the other part of the myth, when you consider it, is Io turned into a cow, and that's just not as erotic as the other parts of the tale.
visual artists and writers at that time, musicians too, they were all reflecting what was going on around them, and you see that again and again, even in the relationships between the people and how they're reacting to each other. You know, Renaissance artists, it was all planned. They weren't, nothing was left up to chance, and so they were using what they knew. They knew about contemporary relationships, biblical scenes or classical scenes, about what it was really like to be there. I think that to me is what makes our art history so cool, is that you get these windows, into the past.
On a different note, you know those ugly babies that seem to appear in every medieval painting before the Renaissance period? Well, the ones that look like Benjamin Button. Turns out that they were painted that way for a very specific reason, and that is because philosophers of that time believed Jesus to be born as a baby unchanged. So I guess the only right thing to do was to paint every baby as someone who looks like they're trying to mortgage you a house.